trying to bring you up to date with all of the latest news and information about the appalling weather conditions that have hit the south of England and are now heading north. Of course, normally at this time we would have after 9, and Jayne is here.
Just about, only just that. I must say the journey into work this morning was quite horrendous. I have never seen anything like it. I mean, just driving up my road, it looked like somebody with a huge chainsaw had just gone along and chopped down all the trees on the road, and just chimney pots all over. Every road I turned down, I seemed to be blocked by trees. I mean, even major roads into the centre of London were blocked by trees. And in fact, extraordinary sight on one road. One tree had actually fallen over from one garden right across the main road into another, and there was a wall at the other side, and it was kind of resting on this wall. And somebody had hacked a hole through the tree, so we were actually able to drive through the branches of this tree, which was a fairly hairy moment, I can tell you. But I also saw one car which had been crushed right under the weight of a tree, and I think there'll be quite a few people this morning waking up to find similar sorts of damage. One of our researchers actually on After 9 rang in this morning to say that her house had been devastated. Apparently the extension of her house had just collapsed. The windows had been blown in, and sort of gales had been rushing through the house. You know, it's just unbelievable. And obviously we're all desperately trying hard here to keep you up to date with all the very latest news. Upstairs in the newsroom, it's quite chaotic, people rushing around. I tried this morning to phone around some of the regions to find out what's going on, but you just simply can't get through. But anyway, yeah, we are keeping you up to date with all the latest news, but I'd imagine you had quite a job this morning.
Our priority was to get some sort of service onto the air this morning, and it was a bit of a problem because our studios were blacked out and we had no way of getting any emergency power going this morning. So we trooped down to the Thames Television studios, which are right in the centre of London, and they had managed to pull together some sort of emergency power service. And at 6 o'clock this morning, Richard Keys and myself went on the air, sitting together in one of their little announcement studios. And we managed to bring you some sort of service. In fact, the first thing we were able to bring you this morning was an Elton John interview, because it was the only thing we could do, and we kept interspersing that with updates on the news. And of course, as we've been on the air for the last 3 hours now, the situation has been getting worse and worse, and we've learned, unfortunately, of more people losing their lives because of the weather conditions. The official statement at the moment from the Home Office is that they're saying there's no question of invoking emergency powers at this stage. And I think on the end of this phone I have the Shadow Home Office Minister, Mr. Stuart Randall, who thinks otherwise. Good morning, Mr. Randall.
Good morning to you.
What is your view of the situation? Should we be invoking emergency powers?
Well, first of all, I think we've got to recognise that the storms that we've got are really very, very serious indeed, and they're the worst that we've recorded, certainly since the last war. And what concerns me is that the government really needs to carry out an immediate assessment to see what effect this is all having, not only on individuals, but on the emergency services that are trying to provide help in the way in which they are. And I believe that when the government has carried out this assessment, which is going to take a little bit of time, but I believe that it's got to be dealt with very, very quickly, I think it ought to decide, first of all, what role it has in this, to provide compensation, provide money if necessary, and when it's done this, to decide also whether there are any other emergency measures it should invoke. And I hope very, very much indeed that the government and the Home Secretary particularly will be making a very early statement, a detailed statement on the extent of the damage, the effect that it's having on individuals and the emergency services, and what it intends to do in order to provide necessary compensation for it. So we're waiting to see what role the government has and what it intends to do.
If emergency powers are invoked, the situation is declared an official emergency, what does that enable ordinary people to do? Ordinary people who are waking up this morning to find their homes devastated?
Well, of course, when one provides help, I think the first thing that one wants to do is to make sure that where there's life and limb at risk, that all the emergency services have the resources and the necessary help, possibly even help from the army, to provide the necessary rescue work and so on and so forth. As far as individuals in houses who've lost parts of their homes, I think that individual compensation will have to be provided through the insurance companies, but I'm advocating that there should be possible help from the government just because of the extent of the damage, the seriousness. I believe we have a crisis on our hands as far as certain parts of the country is concerned, and I think practical, down-to-earth help is needed, and I believe in particular that the government has a very, very special role to play in this.
We understand from our sources this morning that the Army is out in several counties in the south of England helping. Also, to help paint a picture of what's happening with the emergency services, we also understand that 2 firemen have been killed in the south while they were out obviously trying to do something to help. Why then would the Home Office at the moment be saying there's no question of invoking emergency powers?
Well, that's for them to decide, and it's the Home Office that are actually have the information about the extent of this damage. But I believe that there is probably a coordinating role that the government should be playing here, because if certain emergency services, because of the cuts that we've had in the past and so on and so forth, are stretched to the extent that they're not able to provide the coverage and the level of service needed, then I believe it's possible that supplementary help might be needed from other counties and certainly from the armed services. And I think it is this kind of statement that we want to hear from the government to make sure that if there are problems in providing this help, and it must be provided immediately, then this is a statement we want to know that the government is playing a full role and that we're not having problems either just because the emergency services are stretched to their limits.
What of you this morning? What will you be doing to ensure that?
Well, I will be, in fact, getting in touch with the Home Secretary myself and getting a full statement from him. I'll be talking to him on the telephone this morning to find out exactly what is happening and to make sure that we're not going to have procedures, official procedures and long periods of assessment such that the services themselves, that I believe probably might need some extra support, we're not going to be in a position where these services are going to be held up by officialdom. I think speed is of the essence, and I hope very much that this is what the government will be doing.
And what about your area itself? Where are you speaking from this morning?
Well, I'm one of these people that have this great problem. I was in the House of Commons yesterday, and I've got my surgeries in Hull later on today, and I've got the problem now of travelling from London this morning, later today, up into the area where the bad weather is getting worse. So I'm having to listen and take advice from the emergency services myself. So I'm one of the people that's affected by it, and again, it's very worrying and very serious.
Well, I do hope you get up to Hull safely. Stuart, Randall, thank you very much for joining us.